Hey guys, it's David Baldacci. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm thrilled to be here, particularly in support of such great independent bookshops. A huge shout out and thanks to Lingham Books, Book of Books, Bookish, and Forum Books. They're terrific independent bookstores, and they've organized all these live chats with authors and for inviting me here to chat tonight. And you can buy signed copies of my book, Walk the Wire, at all of those wonderful shops. This is the book, although I have to tell you, this is not the British version. This is the American version. The British version has not made its way over to me yet, but I know it's on the bestseller list over there. And yes, that's maybe the same picture over there. So hopefully you guys will go out and support your independent bookshops, buy the book, and enjoy it. Bookstores mean a lot to me. And when I go out, when I was a kid, I would go to Independent Bookshop in Richmond, Virginia. It was a Richmond bookstore. It was run by some great people. It was actually their grandson grew up to be Vince Gilligan, who created the show Breaking Bad that everybody loved. And I would go there and buy used books, and that really introduced me to writing and reading. And it was just a wonderful thing for me. And that really started my love of reading. When you go into an independent bookshop, it's just different. They know what they've got. They know the stuff. They can lead you to jewels and treasures along the way and find you books that you never even thought existed. And it would be terrific. So that's where my love comes from. And I support them across the board. I was supposed to be on a big tour across the states for this book. Obviously, with the pandemic, all of it got canceled, but all the shops along the way were going to be independent bookstores in the US. And I visited many of them overseas in the UK and have loved every minute of it, not just meeting fans and readers and all that, which is terrific, but meeting some great people who own these shops, who have a passion for books and readers and writers, and made me feel so welcome. Let me talk about Walk the Wire. It's the sixth installment in the Amos Decker series. Amos Decker is my detective. He's a big bear of a guy. He used to play American football before he was leveled on the field and came away with a brain trauma that caused a condition called hyperthymesia, which is Greek meaning perfect recall. So he has this perfect memory, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. So he is now heading to North Dakota with his FBI partner, Alex Jameson, and they're going to investigate the murder of a young woman. Her body was found by a hunter who was out looking for a wolf. And the curious thing about her body is that she's already been autopsied. Someone has already performed a postmortem on her, and it was not the police. It was the person who killed her. And Decker's a little bit confused on why they're even being called up for this, because in the States, the FBI is not called in for local murders unless it's a serial killer or something like that. And he comes to realize that it's not so much the crime as the victim. The victim, for some reason, is very, very important to the FBI and the federal government. Now, when I was thinking about this book, I was curious and interested in fracking, which is how they drill down and get oil from shale rock that used to be, you couldn't get the oil out. Somebody figured out how to do it. You can make billions of dollars. So now we have fracking booms across the US. In North Dakota, there are two other interesting elements. One is an eye in the sky run by the U.S. Air Force. It looks out for nuclear weapons being fired at us by, back in the Cold War, the Russians, and it's still there. And there was a religious sect in North Dakota called the Hutterites that started out in Germany several centuries ago, and they live with the scripture of communal living. So in North Dakota, there's this Hutterite religious colony, and they bought a bunch of land from the Air Force. So it was like farming right next to this super secret eye in the sky military facility. So that's on the eastern side of North Dakota. On the western side, you have all the shale, all the fracking towns, the big boom. It's like the California gold rush. Everybody's running there to make as much money as possible. So what I did as a writer, since I get to play God when I'm a novelist, I took the Air Force facility and the religious sect on the eastern side of North Dakota and magically, with my Harry Potter wand, transported it to the western side of North Dakota and plopped all three of those elements together. And I have an author's note in the book that says, look, I know they're not all located for real in the same spot in North Dakota. Do not email me and tell me I don't know my geography. I do. But in a novel, I'm allowed to do that. So Decker and Jameson get up there and they find this is a town that has a lot of dark secrets. There's a lot of things happening. There was a lot of stuff connected to the woman's death. And hopefully my big bear of a detective, along with Alex Jameson, will be able to figure it out. I hope you enjoy the book. I hope you like Amos Decker. And I thank you for being here tonight. And I just hope you keep reading, because books are great friends during good times. And sometimes they're even better, more comforting friends in bad times. Now, we have a lot of questions. So let's get going on those. The first question comes from Adam Harding Jones, who I'm told is a big fan. Thank you, Adam, very much. I appreciate that. They say writing is a solitary process, just you and a blank screen. How has the lockdown helped or has it hindered? I have to say it has helped me immeasurably. I've done two things during the lockdown, and I've tried to practice, social distancing and sheltering in place. So my wife and I do not go out. We're at our place in Florida, and we're hunkered down just like everybody else is supposed to be. So I've done a couple of things. I've been working out like a fiend. I've been using my Nordic rower. I think I've rowed around the world. I've at least rowed across the Atlantic and Pacific and come back around like millions of miles on my rower, give or take. Obviously, I'm embellishing because I'm a fiction writer. And I've ridden my bike like 100,000 miles because what else is there to do? But I have been writing like a fiend. And I've been writing on two books at the same time, simultaneously, something I never did before. And those two books are the sequel to Atlee Pine, the third installment of the Atlee Pine series. She's my FBI agent who has a twin, Mercy Pine, who was kidnapped when they were little girls, and she has no idea what happened to her. In this installment that I'm writing right now, you will find out what happens to Mercy Pine. It will not be the end of the Atlee Pine series, but she takes a significant step forward. And like in Walk the Wire, without giving it away, I have an appearance from another series character in the Atlee Pine book I'm working on right now that you guys have read about in the past. So they've come together to investigate a crime in the new Atlee Pine book. I can't tell you the title because I haven't come up with it or finalized it, but as soon as I do, we'll post it on Facebook and all the other places, and you guys will get to see what the title is. So 2 weeks I work on Atlee Pine, which is set in 2020, contemporary times. And then I get in my little time machine and I blast off and I go back to 1949 for 2 weeks, where I've been writing the sequel to One Good Deed, which is my gumshoe detective, Aloysius Archer. And I have been incredibly productive. I'm almost done with the Atlee Pine book. In fact, today I'll be writing the final chapter in that novel and then sending it up to everyone in New York to look at. And I will spend the rest of the time working on the Aloysius Archer novel. And it is as cool as it sounds, being in my own little personal time machine. I just have to make sure that I don't cross the streams, and because they're two very different times in life, 2020 and 1949. The world is very different, thank goodness, because in many ways it was very bad for lots of people, minorities, people of color, women, not so great for them. And it gave me a great perspective, obviously, when I was writing the Atlee Pine series in 2020. We've come a long way. We have a lot more to go. So it's been really, really productive for me. And I'm going to come out of this with two books done, and I'm going to be probably in the best shape of my life because I've been working out like crazy. Endorphins are great creative juices. So there you go. From Jane Chance, being a best-selling author, you must often be recognized by your readers in everyday situations. What is your most memorable experience of unexpectedly meeting a fan? Well, authors almost never recognize in public. We're not musicians and athletes and actors. Nobody really looks at the back of the book to see what I look like. I do kind of look like this guy. And which is great. It's kind of like being a celebrity that's anonymous, which is wonderful. I would not want to be mobbed by people. But even when you are recognized in public, it's not the ego stroke you think it might otherwise be. I was having lunch with my wife in a restaurant. We were sitting in a booth. This is pre-pandemic. This is many years ago. And I noticed that a woman at another table, she was having lunch with a gentleman, I assumed it was her husband, kept staring at me. I mean, like laser locked staring at me, like to such an extent that I was really uncomfortable. And I just stopped looking. And then a few minutes later, I sensed a presence next to me. And I looked up, I thought it was a waitress. It was the woman. So she pushed me over in the booth and sat down next to me, which was quite incredible, I thought. And she looked at me with sort of a very weird smile and said, "You are who I think you are, aren't you?" And I had no idea who this woman was. I didn't know if she was nuts. I didn't know if she had a gun. And I was trying to keep it calm. So I said, "Well, do you read a lot of fiction?" And she said, oh, yes, I do. I love fiction. And I said, "Well, I guess I am who you think I am." And then she just lost it. She was like, "Oh my God, I never thought I'd have the opportunity to meet you in my whole life. This is the most magical moment in my life. I can't even process what's happening to me right now." So then she turns and she screams across the restaurant to, I guess, her husband, so loud everyone in the restaurant can hear her. And she screams out, "I was right, Joe. It is John Grisham." Now, I've known John a long time. He's a great guy. We've done lots of events together. He's just a wonderful gentleman. I have to say that that moment in my life, I was not really feeling the love for John at all. And my poor wife, to put it delicately, she blew iced tea out of her nose and said to the woman very politely, that's the right genre, but the wrong author. And the woman did look incredibly embarrassed. And she goes, "Oh my God, are you Baldacci?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." So then she screams across the restaurant to her husband and says, "You were right, Joe. It is the Italian." So I preface this with saying it's not really ego stroke when you're recognized in public. That definitely was not an ego stroke for me. One other time that I was recognized in public, I was actually flying on an airplane. And I'm sitting in my seat, and the pilot comes out of the cockpit, and I see him talking to one of the flight attendants, and they're kind of glancing at me, and I'm thinking to myself, what did I order too many bags of peanuts, or did I grab a pillow I wasn't supposed to? And then the pilot came over and sat down next to me, and he looked at me really earnestly, and I was getting a little freaked out because I don't like pilots talking to me while the plane is going. And he said, "I got a great idea for a thriller. Do you want to hear it?" Now, I don't know about all of you, but I like two pilots flying every plane that I'm on. So I made a deal with this guy. I said, "Look, you know what? Get back up there in the cockpit and you fly this sucker safely. If you land it safely, I will stay behind and I'll listen to your story." And he landed safely. I stayed behind. He sat down and told me his story. Um, it sucked. I mean, it was like horrible. I didn't tell him that. I just said, everybody has a purpose in life. And I think that your purpose is to fly planes because you're really good at it. And most people can't fly planes and most people can't write books. So I think you're doing what you really should be doing. And so that's where I left it with him. So those are a couple of my encounters with fans. From Sue, the owner of Lingham's. Hi, Sue. How are you? I miss you too. I can't wait to get back over there. Would you consider writing an autobiography? No, I never would because I know everything there is to know about me. And I think that would be boring for me. I'd just be going over old ground. Maybe you guys would like it. I don't know if I've accomplished enough to justify an autobiography, but you never say never. Was it difficult leaving your legal career to become a full-time author? I had been writing since I was a kid. My mom gave me a blank page book when I was a kid. I later learned she did it just to shut me up because I didn't stop talking. I mean, I just talk the whole time. And I grew up to be a trial lawyer, and that's all trial lawyers do. We just talk the whole time. We're like paid by the word. So I started writing little short stories down because I love short stories. And I wrote lots of short stories. I sent them off to places like Atlantic Monthly, Story Magazine, even Playboy, which back then published a lot of great fiction in addition to the pictures and stuff, but it got roundly rejected by all of them. But I kept going. And I went from short stories to screenplay writing, got an agent in LA based on my screenplays when I was practicing law. I had a couple of options, none of them were ever made. Then I had an idea for a novel, Absolute Power, and I wrote that, and my whole life changed. The thing is that lawyers and writers share a lot of the same attributes. As a lawyer, the only arrows that I had in my quiver were words. Everything that I did was based on words. I would, argue orally in court. I would write my briefs using words. In the trial record, each side has the same set of facts. And how can you argue so diametrically opposed versions of those facts? Well, you write creatively. You emphasize certain facts, de-emphasize others, you deflect things that hurt your clients, you embellish things that help your client, and you were telling a story. So whenever I got up in court to speak or briefs to write, I used words to tell a story and to prove a point that was best for me and my client. And I did lots of research when I was a lawyer. I would go out and interview people, depose people, fact find, master a certain subject matter that I knew nothing about before I sat down to look at it when I needed to know it for purposes of trying a case. And I spent years on cases. So spending years on writing a book was not daunting to me. That was my whole professional career. So lawyers and writers, John Grisham, Scott Turow, and others, Lisa Scottolini, it shares a lot of the same attributes. So the transition was not all that difficult for me. Is there anything you miss from your lawyer days? That may take longer than we have left on this chat. Uh, I miss some of the people I used to work with. I don't miss being told what to write. I don't miss a lot of my clients. Um, I don't miss not being my own boss. I was doing a interview with Michael Connolly earlier today, and we both agreed that the one thing you need to have when you're writing a novel, because it's very hard and can be frustrating at times and maddening at times, is you have to have fun with it, and you can be your own boss. Particularly if you don't outline the whole book, so you get to get up every day and write about what you want to write about, not what a paper is telling you to write about. So, being your own boss, you're never that when you're a lawyer. Even if you're a big senior partner, the client is the boss. The client tells you what to do. So I love getting every day and being my own boss and doing what I want to do. From Lisa. Hello, Lisa. Thank you. What are the best books you have read and the worst? That's a tough one because I've read a lot of great books. And uh, I'm not going to list any of the worst ones just because I'd never professionally diss other writers. It's too hard to write a book. Anybody who's actually done it, I'm not going to say anything negative about it because it's a very subjective business. And look, I sent stuff out and got rejected because people didn't like it. And I'm just not going to do that to another author. But some of the books that I've really enjoyed uh, reading are To Kill a Mockingbird, which is an American classic. A Tale of Two Cities, Oliver Twist, Great Expectations from Dickens, which is terrific. Sherlock Holmes stories, Agatha Christie stories that I cut my teeth on as a crime reader when I was younger. Cider House Rules by John Irving, which I think is even better than The World According to Garp. Huckleberry Finn. I'm a Twainiac. I'm on the board of the Mark Twain House in Hartford here, and my wife and I started the Mark Twain Literary Prize. This will be the fourth year that we give it out. Huckleberry Finn was this first great American novel, and that one has always stuck with me. But I'm a writer today because I was a reader as a kid. I fell in love with words. When you read a book, you're dropping into the imagination of someone else, and you are holding something that did not exist until another human being sat down and created the entire thing. It's almost unlike any other occupation that you create everything that's in that and from scratch, and it didn't exist before that. And it's not like making the same product over and over again because the next time you read another book, it's a totally different experience. And there's nothing that exists for that. And you have to create everything else over and over again, which is the marvelous thing about it. From Gil Turner. Hello, Gil. What are you most looking forward to after lockdown? That's a great question, actually. Um, I spend a lot of my time in solitude anyway, and in solitary confinement as a writer, where long days just by myself, either facing a printed page or a computer screen. Um, so I'm used to that. But I'm also a social person. I love going out on tour because I love standing up in front of people and telling funny stories and just feeling the energy from crowds. I love going out and hanging out with my fellow authors, which is always so much fun. I love my family and my friends. I think if I had to pick one thing right now, uh, I'd love to be able to go and hug my kids. My kids are grown. They're off on their own now. One in Virginia and one in Texas. I've only done Zoom videos with them, like everybody else. I haven't personally held them in my arms for months, which is really kind of killing me because I'm sort of my wife is the tough one in the marriage. She's the tough parent, the disciplinarian, the one that made the kids as wonderful as they are. It's all due to her. I'm the softie. I'm the guy that comes in and tells the kids they're terrific and wonderful and hugs them and gives them stuff. And then mom has to correct all the stuff that I did. But I really am looking forward to being able to see them again and not on a computer screen. So, as I'm sure many of you out there who are in the same situation want as well. From Sue and Tony. Hello, Sue and Tony. Out of all the characters, Amos Decker, John Puller, Atlee Pine, is there one that is harder to write about than the others? Do you have a personal favorite? Right now, I would have to say it's a tie. Personal favorite between Amos Decker and Aloysius Archer. It could be because they're some of my newest characters, although Atlee Pine will be really in the mix as well because it's so fresh and new and unexplored for me. I think Amos Decker is the character, for whatever reason, I relate most to, and he's the easiest one for me to channel and to write about. He's aloof, he's reserved, he doesn't pick up on social cues, he's annoying, and I'm not really all of those things. At least I hope I'm not, and then, if I am, please speak up. Um, but I just get into his character so easily. I sort of get where he's coming from, the disconnect he has with society. There's a line in Walk the Wire where he's really feeling down on himself, and he feels like he's changing again, which is scaring him. He's afraid his brain is going to change again, and he and Alex Jameson, his friend, is trying to comfort him, and she said, "You know what? Um, you don't walk out on people while they're still talking to you nearly as often as you used to. I think that's real progress." And that's just a great line because it says a lot in a very few words about both characters. So the hardest one for me to write, probably John Puller. He's a military guy. I was never in the military, but I really tried to immerse myself in that world as much as I could. My dad was in the Navy. All my uncles served in the military branches. I worked probably harder than any other to immerse myself in that world. I went and visited military installations. I trained with Army Rangers down at Fort Benning. I did crazy stuff, parachuting and sniper rifles and Army functional fitness training where they try to kill you, and came close with me a few times. But he's probably the hardest one for me to channel, which is not a bad thing as a writer, because what you want to be during the course of your career is not complacent, but challenged. Challenge is a good thing for a writer. Keeps you on edge, keeps you on your toes. From Carrie. Hello, Carrie. Have you ever thought about writing a book or written one that has been consciously or unconsciously, not talking about plagiarism, thank you for pointing that out, influenced by reading another author's book? It's really weird. When I was first thinking about wanting to be, a novelist, and my favorite writer back then, this is high school and college, was John Irving. And I read everything that John Irving wrote. And he was kind of like a messiah to me. He was an icon. He was the person I wanted to be like. I wanted to write the sort of books, these multi-generational yarns that he wrote about that were so sophisticated and nuanced. And I came to realize they couldn't write those books because I'm not John Irving. And every writer has to find his or her voice. But I do think that lots of writers that I've read over time, you absorb, how they go about their craft. And this writing is a craft, so we're apprentices for life. We never master this, ever. There's no master's degree in writing, really. You just write and you write and you write. You develop your own style, then you may change that style. You may refine it, polish it, or move on to a completely different style. But you have to find your own voice, your own way of telling a story. Every writer has to do that. So at some point, you can love lots of writers that have come before you and admire their techniques and how they tell a story. And you may take bits and pieces of how they tell stories and put it into your own craft and your own storytelling ways. But at the same point, at the end of the day, you have to grow your own independence and become who you are as a writer. From Carol. Hello, Carol. Do you think there's a good story to be had in this experience in time of pandemic? An angle that hasn't been used before, as we all experience it personally and therefore more acutely observed. Somebody asked me this in an interview a while back, and I obviously have been covering the pandemic very closely. I go on my Worldometer every day. It's an obsession now to see where we stand as a world and as a country in the United States. It's not looking great at all, and we're slowly opening back up. And if you're in some states like Florida, not as slowly as they should be. So that's kind of disheartening. I would, if I were going to write a story like this, I would not go big. I would not try to, write a contagion angle and, lots of people are infected and lots of people die. I would go from a very small, very personal angle. I remember watching or seeing a still photo. It was either a doctor or a nurse. I'm not sure. They were in blue scrubs. They had their masks dangling down. They were sitting outside the hospital, obviously on a break after working ungodly hours in dangerous circumstances with not enough PPE and all the other things to protect the frontline healthcare workers that we seem to have a shortage of here. And no doubt having seen many, many people die in a 12-hour period. Just looking at that picture of that person, that human being who had been worn down to a spot that you would wish on no one, not even your worst enemy, because it would be this feeling that I saw in the photo of hopelessness and no hope, no vision no way out of this, that this is the way, this is the new normal, which is a devastating sort of realization. I would look at that photo and build a story around one person's perspective, one person's experience. Go small, but when you go small through an individual perspective, all of a sudden it takes on enormous consequences and enormous types of, point that you can make from it is this is a pandemic affecting billions of people across the world. If you write a story about billions of people, you just dilute the effect of everything you're trying to achieve. If you look at it from one person's perspective and build from there up, not here, down, it'll be a much, much more powerful story. So if I were going to do it, I would go back to that photo of that doctor or nurse and try to channel all the human emotions they're feeling and trying to build a story around that from an individual perspective, this horrible global nightmare. From Becky Curry. Hello, Becky. What can you tell us about the founding of the Wishiwa Foundation? The Wishiwa Foundation, my wife and I founded it about 18 or 19 years ago. And our mission is to eradicate illiteracy in the United States. We have a big illiteracy problem here. You wouldn't think so in the richest country on earth, but we do. Lots of people can't read or read at a high enough level. And you would think as an author that my motivation is certainly clear. I want more people to read books and they'll buy more of my books. That's not really why. When I first started out as an author and I was trying to get known, and a lot of the events that were put together for me were done by libraries or friends of the library events. And a lot of those same organizations have a lot to do with literacy and literacy efforts in the US. So I got a crash course in the effects of illiteracy on people in this country. And I understood quite quickly that one, illiteracy and poverty are tied together, inextricably go hand in hand. That if you're illiterate, you're never going to realize your potential as a person. And if you're illiterate, the chances are very high that your kids will be illiterate or read at a lower level than they should be. And you have this whole generational cycle of poverty going that never goes away, just from that one fundamental skill lacking in your life. And if you live in a democracy, which we do, it's a fundamental skill to have if you want to be a full participant in a democracy. Because to be a full participant, you need to be able to arrive to your own conclusions about who you want to vote for. How do you do that? Well, you read lots of stuff, process lots of complicated information, and you synthesize it, distill it down to what forms your opinion, and then that's who you're going to vote for or not vote for. Now, if you don't have the ability to do that, what happens? Well, in this country, what happens is there are a lot of really bright, brilliant people who paid a lot of money to just flood you with information that probably is not true at all, to manipulate you into voting the way they want you to vote. So they are trying to control you because you can't come up with your own opinions. And don't think it doesn't happen. It happens every day. It happens every second. It's happening right now where I'm on this chat. And that result is not a democracy. That result is a manipulated society. And that only goes down one path. And we've seen it historically. It goes to authoritarian regimes, dictatorships, ugly, nasty business where, if you think about it, dictators don't need people to vote for them, really. All they need are followers. And at some point in that, you don't have a choice in being a follower. Either you're a follower or you're dead or you're in prison. And historically, we've seen that happen not 9 times out of 10 or 8 times out of 10, but 10 times out of 10. And we've had two world wars based on that. And most wars are based on that. So reading is a way for you to be a full participant in a democracy. And if you can't, then we won't have a democracy. It's just that simple. And sometimes I fear for us in many regards with that, where it seems like a lot of people being manipulated to vote in certain ways or against not only their own self-interests, but in a way that ensures that we will not have a free and open society. I hope I'm wrong about that, but I don't want to take the chance. So the Wishiwa Foundation, we have spent millions of dollars. It comes all out of our pockets. We take donations. We pay for all administrative costs. We fund literacy programs and initiatives across all 50 states. These organizations help millions of people to learn to read at a higher level over the years. We also collect books, and on my book tours, we have those shipped to local area food banks around the country. People with low literacy skills almost always are food challenged. So when they go to the food banks now, they bring food home they need to survive, but they bring books home, which they need to thrive and reach the potential and lift them out of that generational cycle of poverty. I want to fill up every book in America. I want to fill up every book across the world, uh, every home with books. I've never seen a bad result from a book being in a home. I've seen many bad results from no books being in a home. In the Wishiwa Foundation, we are dedicated to make sure that everybody will have access to books. Everybody will have access to the ability to read at a higher level. What was my experience like working with Clint Eastwood? I got a call from Bill Goldman. He's a legendary screenwriter. He wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He wrote All the President's Men, Marathon Man, the book and the movie, The Princess Bride, the book and movie, won 2 Oscars, legendary guy. I worked with him on Absolute Power. He wrote the script. One night, Bill calls me up and says, "Hey, David, I've got some great news for you, and I've got some terrible news for you." I was like, okay, what's the great news? He said, the great news is that iconic filmmaker Clint Eastwood he signed to star, direct, and produce Absolute Power. Because of that, the studio has green-lighted it. The film is going to be made. Your book is going to head to the big screen. Congratulations. I was like ecstatic. I mean, Clint Eastwood, oh my God. He was like, back then, like one of the biggest stars ever. And after I got off the phone call with Bill Goldman, I called everybody I knew my whole life. You know, Mrs. Dugan, yes, you had me in first grade, right? I'm never going to believe what happened to me. So I called everybody. So then I asked Bill, so what's the bad news? He said, well, legendary iconic filmmaker Clint Eastwood is signed to star, direct, and produce your book into a movie. I'm afraid your book is pretty much gone. There's going to be a lot of changes made to it because Clint wants to be the hero. Clint can't die in the film as he does in the book, the character of the burglar. So there you go. And for me, it was fine. I mean, Clint Eastwood makes a movie out of my very first novel. Who's going to have a problem with that? So I met Clint many times. I went to some of the filming. He's as terrific as you think he might be on set. He runs a great set, never raises his voice. His team is terrific. He's worked with the same people for decades. He runs a clean shop, efficient set. The director, actor, he has to set the whole shot up. So he has to control hundreds of people doing their jobs. And he puts on his costume and goes in front of the camera and acts. And back, checks the shot, and then moves on, which is an amazing sort of hats to juggle in a stressful situation like that, where you have, multi-million-dollar budget and lots of people's careers and lives depending on it. So I was very much impressed with his professionalism. From Dottie and Worrell, do you still have the notebook given to you by your mom? I do. And I have to say that having gone back and looked at some of the stories that I wrote in that notebook, I got better. Thank goodness. I got better. But for the age I was then, it showed some interesting imagination and creativity and just going down a different path, which I kind of liked. But as a writer, all you can do is keep at it, and hopefully you do get better. I remember I sent up Absolute Power to 7 agents when the manuscript was done. 6 of the 7 pounced on it and said, oh my God, we want to represent you. This is a great book. We're going to sell this book. And I picked my agent. He's still my agent today, and I love him to death. He's a close friend. But I met the 7th agent years ago who passed. He's the only one who passed in the manuscript. And he was very frank. He came over to me and he said, you know what? That was the biggest mistake of my entire career, passing on you and that book, because now look at the career you've had. And I looked at him and I said in all candor, I said, look, this is subjective business. What one person likes and another person doesn't like, that's your job. That's what you're paid to do. Just because you didn't connect with my material doesn't make you any less of an agent. And back then, maybe you were right to pass in that novel. Maybe it didn't work for you at that point in time. But I also think that over the years, I've worked really hard at my craft and I've gotten better. I go back to some of my earlier books and I kind of cringe sometimes at what I see. That's a better job. That's all that you can do. From Carrie, Book of Books. Carrie, do you use a computer or notebook for writing? Both. I compose a lot on a computer, and I also write longhand. I'll write chapters in longhand just because I think better in cursive, loop together writing. which I started to teach back in the United States, which is a great thing. I think better in cursive because it just allows my mind to flow. I don't have to worry about the typing. I'm a good typist, but you don't have to worry about hitting the right keys. It's just a pen. And so I edit longhand. So I'm close to the point where I'm going to print out the new Adderley Pine manuscript. I'll print it out. I got my pens, and I'm going to bloody the crap out of that manuscript. I'm just going to tear it apart and replace sections, add stuff in, take stuff out. So I built the framework of the story. It's a good framework, but now I've got to polish it. I've got to make the house special. Now it's got the studs and the drywall and the foundation and the roof on, but now I've got to put in all the things that make your house look different from everyone else's house. The things that actually makes it special. That would make all you want to read that novel instead of just looking at it and saying, "Well, I've seen a million houses like that." So that's where I'm close to that point, and I am salivating because that's where the real fun begins for me. When you started the Memory Man series, how many books did you plan for? Didn't plan for any particular number of books. I'm going to write about Amos Decker until he and I run out of gas. I think he's got a lot left. Why do you think readers respond to Amos Decker, and how easy is it to make a key detective character different from other well-known detective characters by other authors? That's a great question, and you just got to do it by little bits and pieces. I'd read a book years ago called Born on a Blue Tuesday, a guy who had hyperthymesia. And he also had synesthesia, which is sensory pathways in his brain had crossed over, so sense of smell and taste and all things like that. So he would see days in blue. So if it was Tuesday, in his mind was like this big burst of blue, and it made everything more vivid for him. Musicians and other artists have synesthesia. It just makes them more vital, and their images in the mind just more brilliant than the rest of us. And so that allowed Amos Decker to be different. His perfect recall was both a blessing and a curse. Great for a detective to have perfect memory. You don't forget anything. Terrible if you've had awful things happen to you because you never can forget those. And his whole family was murdered, and he remembers that murder, years later, just like it just happened, because that's what perfect recall is. It's just vivid and there in his face, and you can't get around that. From Anonymous Fan. Hello, Anonymous Fan. What made you start writing Absolute Power? I had written a screenplay called Reverse Order back in 1990, and it was kind of like Die Hard in the White House before they had those two movies 20 years later that were Die Hard in the House. And I'd sent it out. My agent out there was like, "Oh my God, people are loving this. Warner Brothers, Paramount, Universal think this is going to be huge." And I was still working as a lawyer. I had flown up to New York City where I was with a team of lawyers reviewing bank ground leases because our client was buying a bunch of banks. And if you ever have trouble sleeping, I would heartily recommend reviewing bank ground leases. You will be comatose in about 11 seconds, if not sooner. And the whole time I was thinking, there was my script, because I was getting phone calls from the agent, looking good, looking good, looking good. And midnight, after I'd gone to my room for the night and was trying to sleep, my agent called because of the time difference in California, and he delivered the bad news that Warner Brothers passed a script, and everybody, it's herd mentality out there. So everybody thought, well, if Warner Brothers didn't buy it, there must be something wrong with it, so the script didn't sell. And so I remember staring out the window of my hotel in New York thinking, maybe this is not going to happen for me. Maybe the break that I really want is not going to happen for me. So there you go. But then I got back and I'm like, I'm a writer. I love to write. I think I can do this. I can't imagine not having writing in my life. My wife and I used to ride our bikes before we had kids and actually had a life. And we would take our bikes and ride them along the GW pathway into George Washington Parkway into DC, past the White House. And my law office was near the White House. I would walk by it pretty much every day. And I had this idea for the president. And I remember back to the John F. Kennedy years where he had lots of affairs and trysts with other women. And he had the passageways between the Treasury Department and the old Executive Office building, where there were rooms down there. And the rumors were that that's where we'd have some of his affairs, or he would have them in the White House while Jackie was away. And I thought about, what if the president of the United States has an affair with someone, a tryst, and something really bad happens, someone dies, and then there has to be a cover-up. Because you think about it, the president is here, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people's careers who are tied to that one person. So if he falls down, they all fall down. What would you do to cover up the truth on that? And then I thought the idea of a burglar, a criminal, who witnessed this terrible thing. And he turns out to have critical evidence that could destroy the president and everyone else. And this criminal also turns out to be the guy with the highest morals in the whole story. It's kind of like I flipped all the stereotypes. I made the good guys bad guys and the bad guy good guys. And I all did it just because being a student of history, heard about the stories about JFK and wondered what if. So that's where the story for Absolute Power came from. How different is writing a screenplay to writing a novel? I adapted one of my novels for film, Wishiwa. And you think as a screenwriter, when you write it, you're done, you hand it off, and and they make the movie, and you never have to do anything else to it again. Wrong. You were revising the screenplay the whole time that they're shooting. I remember we were filming at a farm in Virginia. Ellen Burstyn, who's an Academy Award-winning actress, was in full costume in front of a camera. We'd had a problem. We'd had this superstorm Sandy had come through. We lost 2 days because of the weather, and 2 days that we could not get back on filming. So there was some holes in the plot because of that, and I had to figure out how to fill those holes because we had lost 2 days of filming. So I'm sitting out in a farmyard at a wooden table with my laptop, and I've got chickens and and animals all over me, between my legs and barking and mooing and everything else. And I am writing the new scenes that Ellen Burstyn, the Academy Award-winning actress, is waiting inside the farmhouse in full costume in front of the camera. As soon as I finish this and go in, and she'll read it, memorize her lines, and deliver it. Talk about a little bit of pressure. And because you have so many departments involved in a film, lighting and makeup and electrical and set construction and wardrobe, everybody has to be on the same page. So if there's ever a change made to the script, people have to know this is the latest version. So how do they do that? Well, they change the color, and there's a chronology that they use of colors. You start off with white, and you go to brown, and then green, and yellow, and chartreuse, and blah 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 blah, all the way. And you never want to get to cherry, which is way down the line, and we blew right through cherry. And so at the end of the day, when the script is all done, and you're finished filming and you made all these changes and you have all these different colored pages, they call it a rainbow script because of that. So I have copies of all the scripts from the movies and TV series that are made out of my books, and they're rainbow scripts, and they're all different color, and that's why they're called a rainbow. So it is very different. As a novelist, I'm the master and commander. Everything I write, that's what it is. With a film, it's a very collaborative process, and sometimes actors have input, directors have input, directors certainly have input, and you have to work with lots of other people. Do you have a preference writing for younger or adult authors? Not at all. I'm an equal, loving fan, reader kind of writer. I love writing fantasies for kids, and I know there was a question in the section over there, am I going to write more fantasies for kids? I would love to, and I think that I probably will. I know that my publisher, Pan Macmillan, we've redone their Vega James series, and with new illustrations and covers and all that. And I've also gone back in and done additional content and made the stories better, I think. And that series, all 4 books, will launch again next year, which is a terrific thing. But yeah, having whetted my appetite for that, definitely would dive back in. But I love writing for readers of all ages, from 8 to 108. Will you miss touring life at the release of your new book during lockdown? Absolutely. I had like 15 cities I was going to go to. What's bad about going to places where hundreds, if not thousands, of people are screaming at you about how wonderful you are? My wife hates that because when I come back home, she said I have to detox you for like weeks, and I'm getting tired of it. She goes, but I'll never leave you. Don't worry. And I said, honey, I'm so glad you love me so much. And she goes, oh, it's not really that. I'm just too old to train a new one. You want to know why I write about only strong, independent women in all of my books? I sleep with one. That's why. That's all I know. I don't know any damsels in distress. Never met one in my whole life. Can't write about that. They don't exist. From Emma, the owner of Bookish. Hi, Emma. Thank you. Most of your books take place in the present day, whereas One Good Deed is set in 1949. Did that present any challenges for you while you were writing it? It did. I really had to go back. I wasn't alive in 1949. I had to go back and sort of learn the world as it was then, because if I couldn't sell you on the atmosphere that you were actually in 1949, if I couldn't sort of immerse you in that, all like millions of little details perfectly put together, then you weren't going to enjoy the story. You weren't going to believe that you were in 1949 for the hours that you're going to be spending writing that book, and that was really important for me. So I started small and then kind of spread out from there. The clothing to the cigarettes to the relations between men and women, the cars, the food, the stores, the dialogue, everything had to be spot on. And I did a ton of research, and I will put here right over here you can see this green notebook thing. That is one of the research volumes that I used for the Aloysius Archer story. And it has tabs like Reno, Nevada, wine country, gambling, terms, fashion, cars, food, cigarettes, just dozens of different subject matters that when you're writing about a contemporary life, you take for granted because you know that stuff. But I had to get that right. So it's a lot more research. How, with so many successful series currently going strong, do you keep all your characters in the universes straight? It's because I created them. And it's not hard for me because for me, they're all indelibly imprinted in my mind and they have their own personalities, their own identities. It's like, forgetting my kids. I can tell my kids apart. Um, I have different favorite kids depending on the day. Just like most parents. Some days I like my son better. Some days I like my daughter better, and kind of changes depending on what they've done during that time. Every parent will understand that. So for me, it's pretty easy to keep it all straight because really they didn't exist until I created them. So every detail that I brought to bear, bring them to life, it's all up here, and it's really hard to sort of get that out of your mind. From Helen, Forum Books. Hi, Helen. Bookshops is in the biscuit factory. Lucky you. What is your favorite biscuit? I have two favorite biscuits. One is almond, and the other one is coconut. And the third one, because there is a third one, would be almond and coconut. Then you have me for life. I'm there. I'll come over. We'll have some tea. Let me take some of the questions from the people who have been writing in. Alan Kimball. Hello, Alan. Mr. Baldacci, I am curious. What was filming your masterclass writing class like? That's a great question. So when masterclass came and wanted me to do a session for them, I said, okay, you know what? But I want to make it really practical, useful information for writers. I don't want to just get up there and tell stories. So I did a lot of homework before we ever filmed anything. And I wanted to take my writing process from conception to delivery and show everybody the steps that went into all of that, not just the writing part of it, but the publishing and the business part of it. So I was very well prepared for that. And they built a set for me in downtown Washington, D.C. I had my own trailer with my own makeup person, to the extent that I need makeup. I don't like wearing makeup for lots of reasons, and it was very cool. They probably had like a 75-person film crew. We had 3 cameras, including a Steadicam, which I thought was pretty amazing. I've been on film sets that didn't have that stuff, that firepower. They were very professional, and I've gotten a lot of great feedback because I looked at it I look at myself as a blue collar, working class, lunch pail toting kind of writer. I don't consider myself highfalutin or sophisticated or above anyone else. I'm just an apprentice to a craft, and I try to get better at it every time by working at it really hard. And that's what I wanted to impress with the people and convey to the people who are watching the masterclass. That this is the nuts and bolts of what I do. You will have to figure out a lot of this on your own, but I can at least educate you on what to avoid, mistakes that I made along the way, processes that work for me, some things that work better for me than other things. But just letting you know that here are a lot of the fundamentals that you will encounter when you're trying to build a career as a writer. This is from Angela Barnes. Hello, Angela. Have you ever lost confidence in your writing? And if so, how do you overcome it? A writer who says they haven't lost confidence at times is lying to you. Any writer who says they never had, writer block, whatever you want to call it, is lying to you. We all do. And I lack confidence with every book I've sat down to write. It's kind of like I'm writing my first novel over and over again. I have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm terrified. But terror is a great antidote to complacency. The last thing you want to ask yourself as a writer is, how did I do it last time? How did I write the last book? Now I could just, same process, same formula, change the names, boom, off to the publisher, ching ching, and cash the check. I've never approached it that way. Every book I've sat down to write, I am terrified I can't bring the magic again. But I think that gives me an edge that makes me work harder. The chip on my shoulder remains enormous, and I just keep rolling because I'm terrified. And I remember that Bill Goldman gave me a great piece of advice when I worked with him on the script for Absolute Power. He said, the first time you, as a writer, you think you know what you're doing, that you got to figure it out, you might as well hang it up because you're dead in the water, and you're never going to meet anywhere close to what you used to be. So for me, I've taken that to heart. And I just keep rolling and knowing that I don't know anything. In every book, I try to get better and better. Judith O'Reilly. Judith, how are you? Yeah, Bloody Scotland. She was there on stage and impressed the hell out of me. And she's a great writer. If you haven't read her novels, check Judith out because it's pretty special. What makes a novel special? What makes it a breakout novel? You can write about lots of different subject matters. You can try to grab onto a trend. When the dinosaur books with Michael Crichton were really popular, everybody's writing about dinosaurs. Even if you're writing a romantic comedy, you had a T-Rex running down the hallway, breaking all the china. Or Da Vinci Code, everybody's writing code books and code scripts. Chasing trends is not a way to have a breakout novel. What makes a breakout novel? If you want to have a great book, you have to have great inspiration for writing that book. And how do you get great inspiration? It's not from, I want to sell the film rights tomorrow and make $1 million and retire from my day job that I hate. That's not true inspiration. Inspiration is, what do you want to write about that really fires you up? You can say, well, I'll write about something I know about. Let me modify that a little bit and say, write about something you'd like to know a lot about. And then you're going to go out there and research the hell out of it, get immersed in it, understand that world better than anyone else. And guess what's going to happen to your plotting skills? They're going to go through the roof. What's going to happen to your prose? It's going to go through the roof. And all of a sudden, you got a breakout novel. Why? Because you're telling a great story that's risen above the slush piles that are stacked on agents and publishers' desks all over this earth. People who wrote about trend books, people who wrote about books because they hate their day job and they wanted to get a better one and make a lot of money really fast. If that's your motivation to be a writer, forget it. Hang it up right now. Find something that really just kicks your butt and makes you want to get up every day and attack it. And if you do that, you're going to have a breakout book. And what is a breakout book? How do you define that? A breakout book is a book that people look at and read and they go, my God, I've never read anything like this in my life. What a ride that was. What a ride that was. That's a breakout book. Okay, let's see where we are over here. I'm surprised. I thought I got a lot better things to do than hang out with me. Which of my fellow writers do I keep in touch with on a regular basis? That's a really good question from Janet Stringer. Thank you, Janet. I appreciate that. We're all busy, and the times when we see each other the most are like at book festivals and book events or on panels. I was on a panel on a Zoom session the other day with Scott Turow, who I've known forever, and Walter Mosley, who I've known a long time and just love. And so we meet that way. We had a book festival down in Florida where we have a home in Florida, and I helped organize the book festival this year. And we had Sandra Brown and Lisa Scottolini and just lots of wonderful authors come in for that event. And so I get to socialize with them then. I did a session with Michael Connolly earlier. Mike and I have known each other for a long time. It was fun to shoot the breeze with him, even on a Zoom session. John Grisham, John has a place down here as well. And he's a very kind, very generous guy. And I like him and think he's wonderful. So it's nice. Sometimes just a phone call, sometimes just email, sometimes just hanging out at book festivals. The next one is from Colin West. Hi, David. I am the last Camel Club, binge read them during the lockdown. Will there be any more series? I get more questions about Camel Club probably than, and I will tell you that if I can find a great story for the Camel Club to come into, then I will do it because I love those guys too. I want to bring them back, but I want to bring them back for the right reason. Let's see. From Char Young. Hello, Char. Hi, David. Do you carefully plan your stories or do they develop as you go? I'll end with this question because we're at 4 o'clock now, at 4 o'clock in my time. Michael Connolly, actually, I had the same discussion today, earlier on a cast. And we were both of the same mind. I've never outlined a whole book. I don't know the end of the book before I sit down to write it. I just like to let it grow organically, and I like to hit it every day, not knowing what path I'm going to take. I have little mini outline chapters that I want to accomplish things in and all that. But I immerse myself in the story and in the character to such an extent that things occur to me. I just have instincts and epiphanies and revelations of where I want to go with the story. Why? Because I'm spending time with the characters, immersing myself in the world that I created so that I can understand how this dynamic should be played out. Not looking at a piece of paper, an outline that tells me what I'm supposed to write that day that I came up with 6 months ago before I even sat down to write one line of dialogue with a brand new character who I don't even know. So how am I supposed to write an outline that tells me everything this person is supposed to do? That may work for some other writers, and it does for a lot of them, and God bless them, and that process works for them. Stick with it and keep rolling. That process does not work for me, and Mike Connolly didn't work for him. I like to let it grow organic. I want to get into the heads of the characters. I want to spend time with them on the page. How do you know some? How do you know anybody you meet in the real world if you haven't even sat down with them, haven't talked to them at all? You're just thinking about who they might be in your head. You write it down on a piece of paper. That doesn't work. For me, I have to spend time with them. I have to work through who they are as a character, idiosyncrasies, a lot of different things. I have to put myself in that world, and then things really start to click and roll and move. That's how I do it. That works for me. It doesn't work for anybody, but it definitely has worked for me. It's a lot more fun. I'll leave you with this because I don't use outline. I surprise myself all the time when I'm writing stories about what comes out of my head on any particular day. I've always thought that if I surprise myself, I will knock the readers on their butts, and that's a good thing. I hope you guys keep reading, stay safe, stay well, and hopefully sooner rather than later, I'll see all of you on the other side of this thing. Okay, take care. Pleasure.